The Eclectic Writer presents The House That No One Built, Part 9, The Final Chapter. The small apartment house shook from the thunder outside. The lights flickered. When they came back on, the man stood in the open doorway. "Come," he said, stretching out his arm. "Come and find your answers." He took a step back as she took a step forward. "This has to be a dream." She took another step forward and he took another step back. "I can't be dead." He stepped back. She stepped forward. She shivered as the rain dumped down on her. The few steps it took to get under the ivy-covered tunnel left her dripping. "At least I'm not wearing white," she said, trying to uncling her clothes from her skin. She looked up and the man was already at the other end. "How did you—" She stopped herself. "What am I saying? You came out of a frickin' TV. How did you get here?" he asked when she finally reached him. It was a few more steps to the back door. A few more steps she didn't want to take. "I walked," she said, looking back to the little apartment house. The man shook his head. "No, how did you come to this house?" He gestured behind him. Serene shook her head. I don't remember exactly." He held the door open for her as she half ran the few steps to get inside. "Think, Serene. What do you remember?" "Phone calls," she said. "I remember getting some stupid telemarketer phone calls. I hung up on them." "Did you?" he asked. Serene found that they were walking down the hallway to the empty... Wait, not empty. Both of these rooms were empty before. She looked at the room to her left. There were two couches sitting opposite each other, a marble coffee table between them. On the far end was a high-backed chair. Round end tables at each of the ends of the couches. They were all familiar. She had seen them before, but where? "What do you mean?" she asked, still trying to figure out where she had seen the furniture before. "Did you hang up on them, or did you speak with them?" "I hung up." She turned and looked at the other room. A piano sat in the corner, one of those upright pianos that didn't take up much space. Instead of its back being against the wall, it was turned so the player could look into the room. "Check again," the curator said. "My phone's dead," Serene said, pulling it from her pocket to show him. "Full charge? How?" More questions. She checked her call log going back a couple of weeks. "See? There they are." She stared at the call record in disbelief. She had stayed on each of the calls more than 20 minutes. Who did she talk to? "And the emails?" he asked. "I didn't say anything about emails," she said as she checked her inbox. "Dr. Sorensen? Oncology?" She rapidly read through the emails and found herself becoming more and more unsteady. "I need to sit down." The curator helped guide her to one of the couches. She sat and stared out the window. It was clean now. She could see the rain as it poured off the roof just beyond the concrete front porch. He brought her a drink and tenderly placed it in her hands. The rain was coming down in sheets, the wind carrying it from one side of the yard to the other. She couldn't see the road through the rain. "I don't remember driving here," she admitted. "No, you didn't drive here." His voice was soft, sympathetic. "You arrived." "Arrived where?" She turned to look at him. Suddenly, his face was familiar. She stared at him, trying to put a name to the face. "Mr. Metzger? You look like my fifth-grade teacher, Mr. Metzger." "That can't be right. You'd be retired or dead." The curator chuckled. "I'm not he," he said. "Merely a face that you remember fondly." "Huh?" Serene held her glass with both hands as she took a sip and stared back out the window. "Dr. Sorensen said that I needed an operation. It was a complicated surgery. He said my chances were still good. Something must have gone wrong." She continued drinking and staring out the window, trying to put the pieces together. "So, if I'm not dreaming and I don't think I'm dead, then what is this place?" She looked around and began to remember. "The basement. I remember the basement. Only it wasn't a basement. It was a game room. A friend of mine's dad had a game room just like that. We used to spend hours playing pool and ping pong. I sucked at both." I liked the pinball machine and the couch. That couch where me and... Oh, never mind that part. She stood and looked closely at the furniture. This was my grandma's couch, and that one too, but not at the same time. This was from the first house, and that was from the last one. That chair, oh, she had that chair forever. The curator nodded as she described each piece of furniture with a piece of her memory. And the cassette tape. Yeah, that's what they were called. It was my dad's. The room upstairs, I've seen that in pictures. My mom's photo album. She had a lot of posters and old stuff in those pictures, but I haven't seen those in years. She turned and looked at the curator, his eyes soft and moist. Why are you sad? Your book. He gestured to the foyer between the rooms. There stood a pedestal with her book. Your book has been written. Serene set her glass on one of the tables and walked over to her book. Thunder boomed as she stepped up to it. Lightning flashed, casting monstrous shadows on the stairs behind her. She cast her eyes on the pages that the book was open to and began to read. We hope you have enjoyed The House That No One Built. If you've missed any part of this story, you can always go back to the archives and find parts 1 through 8. Tune in next week for another short story on Friday Fiction on The Eclectic Writer.